Welcome back to the Pulp, Raconteur and The Swordsman of Mars by Otis, Adelbert, Kline. You may be wondering, once again, where the hell I am, and the answer is Fez, Morocco. We find ourselves in the Palai el Mokri. It's a dilapidated old palace that is being updated and restored, and we stayed in it for the last few nights. So now it's the perfect moment to tell you about the party that our hero has been invited to at the palace. Chapter 12. Like most of the women Thorn had known on his own world, Neva was a long time about dressing. But when after he had waited for more than an hour before her door, she came forth, the result was most entrancing. A tiara of pearls of pale blue amethysts woven together in a bizarre pattern on the meshwork of golden wires bound her sun-bright hair. Beads of the same material formed her breast shields and supported a clinging bodice of iridescent blue silk. This vanished in a girdle of pearls and amethysts. Thorn stood enthralled, and she smiled archly. Then she raised her arms and circled gracefully on the tips of her toes. "Like it?" she asked. "Immensely," he replied, "even as I adore—" He stopped suddenly. "Go on," she urged him, smiling. "Sorry, I said more than I intended. Perhaps you will find it in your heart to overlook my presumption." "Perhaps I shall if you will finish." Then, "Even as I adore," she prompted him. "The star-strewn firmament," he replied. She stamped her tiny foot. "Must I command you?" She moved closer, laid a hand on his arm. "Where I might command," she said, "I will only implore." "The lovely jewel it adorns," he finished. "Ah, that is what I wanted to hear you say. And now for your reward, you will escort me to the reception as a gentleman and officer of the Commode, walking by my side." The reception of Irin's Tell, Dikstar of Zanzibar, was a gorgeous affair, held for the purpose of welcoming Lori Thule, the new ambassador from Calcivar, largest and most powerful nation of Mars. It was a model of magnificence. The function was held in the great central audience chamber of the palace, the ceiling of which towered 1,000 feet above the heads of the assembled guests, its polished surface reflecting the rays of myriad of beridium globes, which made the place light as day. Irin's Tell was standing with his illustrious guest on a dais in the center of the floor. Presenting other visiting dignitaries and his chief officers, when the silvery notes of a trumpet rose above the hum of conversation, instantly every voice was hushed as a pompous majordomo announced, "The Dikstar's a daughter." All eyes were turned towards the doorway as Neva entered, walking beside Thorn. And though they lighted with pleasure at the sight of the dainty little golden-haired beauty who was the First Lady of Zanzibar, not a few admiring glances were cast at the tall, handsome, sun-bronzed young officer. Straight to the dais they went, the girl nodding to right and left to her many friends and acquaintances, as the little rat-faced Dikstar advanced to meet them, accompanied by Lori Thule. Thorn was once more struck by the incongruous dissimilarity between father and daughter. The ambassador was tall, slender, and slightly under middle age, his hair just beginning to gray at the temples. He was quite handsome and elegant in his uniform and insignia of the great noble house of Calcivar. "Neva," squeaked the Dikstar in his high-pitched voice, "this is Lori Thule, the noble ambassador to Calcivar. Lori Thule, my daughter." The ambassador saluted gracefully. "My homage to the most beautiful of the daughters of Mars. It must be that I have now met everyone. Will you not join me in a game of Gapoon? I see they are setting the boards." "In a moment," she answered. "You have not quite met everyone. This is my friend, Sheb Takor Jen." As he and the resplendent ambassador exchanged dignified salutes, the Earthman exulted over the fact that she had said, "my friend." Meanwhile, Neva had beckoned a pretty little black-haired, brown-eyed beauty to her side. "I take it that you have met the ambassador, Trixana," she said, "but not my friend, Shebtek or Jen." Thorn acknowledged with a courtly salute, and a moment later found himself walking at the side of the vivacious little brunette, following Neva and Thori Thule as they made their way towards the gaming boards. From the corner of his eye, he saw Irins Tell standing, chin on chest, and hands clasped behind him. And he was quite positive that the Dickstar's look was not friendly. A moment later, he saw Sel hand slip up behind Irins Tell and, bending, whisper some secret communication. The Dickstar nodded and again flashed a look at Thorn. Lori Thule and the two girls chanced much gold at the gaming boards, and Trixana won quite heavily, but Thorn only looked on. As he was standing, watching the game, he felt a touch on his arm, and turning, beheld the kindly face of the white-haired Lalvac. "Greetings, Shebtek Jen," he said gently. "Turn and watch the game while I deliver a message. We must not seem to be talking together." Thorn looked back at the players, and the scientist continued. "You are in great danger. Selhan is plotting against your life. He has denounced you to the Dickstar as being over-friendly with Neva, and her actions tonight in treating you as an equal have seemed to confirm his words. A friend has brought me news that Irins Tell has just promised Selhan he will turn you over to the headsman in the morning. What can I do about it? Escape. Get away from the palace before morning." That I had already planned. "How?" "Over the garden wall." "Splendid! It is just what we had in mind. I will have a conveyance waiting for you, but there, just after the farther moon rises, and it may be that we can save you. Farewell." When the gathering broke up, Lori Thule, after saying a lingering farewell to Neva, departed with his suite. Trixana was claimed by her father, a tall, handsome soldier in the prime of his life, and Neva, left once more with Thorn, started towards the door. They had only gone a few steps when Selhan suddenly strode up. He made a sweeping bow before Neva. "May I have the honor of seeing the Dickstar's daughter safely to her apartments?" he asked. She took Thorn's arm. "The Dickstar's daughter is adequately escorted." Selhan continued to bar her way, smiling cynically, and the Earthman noticed that the Dickstar himself was only a few feet away, looking on. "Apparently you have not observed that the Dickstar's daughter wishes to pass," said Thorn. "Under such circumstances, it should not be necessary to request any gentleman to stand aside." At this, the deputy flashed a look at the Dickstar, as much as to say, "I told you so," and moved out of the way. Back in the apartments of Neva, as Thorn stood guard before her chamber door, his mind was a mess of conflicting emotions. The time slipped by until he suddenly realized that the farther moon had risen and the hour had struck for his departure. He was about to steal softly away from his post when he was startled by a touch on his arm and a whispered, "Quiet." Swiftly turning, he was astonished to see Neva standing there before the curtain, clad in a filmy sleeping garment. "Make no noise," she said, "and come with me. I heard someone on my balcony. I want you to surprise the prowler." Softly, they entered the sleeping chamber. For a moment, Thorn stood there, accustoming his eyes to the dim light and taking note of his surroundings. Then, he silently drew his sword and advanced towards the balcony, listening intently. Reaching a window without having heard a sound, he cautiously leaned forward and peered out. So far as he could see, the balcony was deserted. He stepped out and explored. Still no sign of a prowler. Then he re-entered the room. "Did you see him?" she asked. "I saw no one," he replied. "Perhaps you were only dreaming." No, I am positive a man was there a moment ago. Not only did I hear him, but I saw his shadow as the moon came up. I am terribly frightened." They were standing very close together. Her eyes, looking up into his, were wide with fear. She swayed toward him, solicitously. Yes. He threw his arms about her, felt that she was trembling. Her arms stole about his neck and clung. "Hold me tight, tight in your arms, I am not afraid." Now it was the man who trembled, but not with fear. Their lips met. "I love you, love you, love you," she murmured. "Say again what you said to me this evening." "I love you and adore you," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Yet this is madness, the sweet madness." "Why, dear one?" "Because tomorrow—" Suddenly the lights flashed on, and he paused, speechless with surprise. A dozen armed soldiers rushed into the room, bared blades in their hands. At their head was Selhan, a grin of triumph on his features, and behind them came Tell, Dixtar of Zanzibar. "Help! The guard! Release me, you brute!" For a moment, Thorn was in a daze. Then he suddenly realized that it was Neva who was speaking, that she was beating upon his breast with her clenched hands, hands that had caressed him but a moment before, straining to break from his clasp. Mechanically, he let her go. She ran to the little wizened Dixtar, buried her face in his shoulder, and began sobbing bitterly. Thorn suddenly came to the full realization of his peril. He whipped out his sword and dagger and leapt for the door. 2 warriors barred his progress. A feint, a thrust, and one went down, stabbed through the heart. He parried the thrust of the other with his dagger. Then he withdrew his blade from the heart of the first enemy and sheathed it in the throat of the second. Other warriors leapt in close, but he bounded over the bodies of his 2 fallen adversaries and out of the door. Straight across the terrace he dashed, then down the steps and into the labyrinth of garden paths. A few moments more, and Thorn had reached his objective, a tall cibolis tree standing near the wall, which he had previously marked for his purpose. Pausing only to hurl his sword and dagger into the faces of his pursuers, he scrambled up the rough tree trunk, then climbed from branch to branch until he was above the level of the wall. Walking out on the swaying branch until it sagged dangerously, he leapt. His fingers caught the edge of the wall, but it was rounded by 1,000 years of weathering and slippery with the night's accumulation of hoarfrost. With a last despairing clutch at the curved, treacherous surface, he fell to the ground 20 feet below. As soon as he struck, a 6 soldiers pounced on him. Weaponless, he fought them with fists and feet until Selhan reached over and struck him on the head with the flat of his heavy mace. Then his captors, at a sharp command from the triumphant deputy, jerked him to his feet and half-carried, half-dragged him back to the palace. Neva, attended by 2 of her slave girls, sat on a divan with a fluffy wrap around her shoulders. Tell was pacing up and down, chin on chest, hands clasped behind his back, his brow contracted in a frown, and his thin lips compressed in a tight line. Presently, a tall, sad-faced man bearing a great 2-handed sword on his shoulder strode into the room. Behind him walked a sleepy-eyed, frightened little boy who carried a basket. "Strike the head from this despicable traitor, Lurgo," squeaked Tell without looking up. Lurgo, the headsman, lowered his huge weapon and stood leaning on the pommel, waiting while 2 warriors dragged Thorn to the center of the floor and forced him to kneel. Then he stepped back, carefully measured the distance with his practiced eye, and whirled the great blade over his head. What will happen in the next chapter? Will he be saved? Will our hero be beheaded? Find out next time on the next chapter of The Swordsman of Mars by Otis Adelbert Kline.